topic 2 panelists come on up and have a seat. Okay, so we will go ahead and get started again. We had such a great discussion for topic 1 for the first half of the meeting, and I think that the one theme that just kept coming up again, I think my FDA colleagues would agree, is that the biggest part of your life, or the biggest impact of living with breast cancer is the treatments and the management of your breast cancer, the doctor's appointments, the decision making as it has to do with treatments. So thank you for bringing up this very, very important part of your life and sharing that with us. And we're going to go into much further detail with this topic, which focuses on treatments. And I know we started bringing that up. You shared so much of that in topic 1, and it's very understandable. So we're looking forward to exploring that even more in this discussion. And certainly if there's other aspects, or downsides or side effects that you are experiencing with your treatments that you mentioned in topic 1 that we didn't get to explore too much, I encourage you to continue to bring those up now and share those with us. Okay, so just to reiterate again how our topic will look. So for topic 2, we're going to be discussing treatments. So what are you doing to manage your breast cancer, to treat your breast cancer, and how do you experience the treatments? What are the benefits that you see? What are the downsides that you're experiencing? And we're also, as I mentioned, we're going to spend a portion of this discussion talking about, and we already brought this up a bit, is the decision making, the factors that you consider in deciding what treatments you will be taking. So with that, let me turn it over to our panelists. Colleen, if you could just get started, and we'll have each one of you introduce yourselves, and then you can start your presentation.
I'm Colleen Duffy. Oh, started? Oh, sorry. So good afternoon. I'm Colleen Duffy. I'm a 34-year-old wife, mother, and engineer. I was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer, which is HER2 positive, in December of 2012. It was just 4 months after my second baby was born. It has since spread to my bone, skin, lymph nodes, lung, and my brain. I have completed a variety of treatments, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to share my perspective on the current approaches with you all. My cancer has recently progressed, and I started a new drug, Capelle, on Monday. I will continue infusions of that drug every 3 weeks until the cancer progresses again. It's just been a few days since I started this new drug, so I'm going to focus on the treatments that I've had up to this point. So my first treatment after diagnosis was a traditional chemo and a targeted therapy. So I started on Taxotere, Herceptin, and Perjeta. I completed 6 cycles with the Taxotere and stopped it, but continued the Herceptin and Perjeta until about 2 weeks ago. I have an infusion of Zometa every 6 weeks, and I've also taken an oral chemo pill, Xeloda, had a mastectomy, undergone whole brain radiation, and heat therapy, and a targeted radiation. The most significant downsides of all of these treatments is that they stop working. The tumors outsmart them and grow. Then there becomes the need to switch. I would be happy to tolerate the side effects and inconveniences caused by any of the treatments if they worked forever. This issue affects my life by not allowing me to make long-term plans, interrupting my routine, my work schedule, and my family's routine. I do many supportive care treatments to manage my side effects. I currently attend a support group, participate in therapy, take a prescribed antidepressant, Lexapro, to manage my mental health. I have also attended many seminars end-of-life preparation, healthy eating, coping strategies, future research, and therapies. As far as my physical side effects, I take Imodium AD and or Lomotil control to control my diarrhea. For pain management, I have taken Oxycontin, Percocet, and fentanyl patches, but I try to stick to the ibuprofen and getting massages. I had to take steroids for the swelling in my brain. I had hyperbaric oxygen treatment for the wounds I had following the heat and radiation therapies. I have also done acupuncture, but following the mastectomy, my oncologist does not recommend it due to the risk of lymphedema. So my mental health has been very well managed thanks to the support networks in my community. The diarrhea is mostly manageable by the medication, but depending on my chemotherapy, it has become extreme. At that point, I go to the oncologist's office and get fluids. Pain management is a challenge because there is a fear of becoming addicted to the pain pills. I am also adversely impacted by impairment when I take Percocet, Oxycontin, and fentanyl patches. The steroids greatly negatively impacted my emotions and my self-control. The hyperbaric oxygen treatment worked very well, but it was a daily therapy that required driving. The only side effect that hasn't been addressed through drugs or alternative therapy is fatigue. I am always so tired. I weigh the importance of prolonging my life much higher than improving the symptoms I experienced due to breast cancer. Staying alive is my main goal in treatment. I have found that most of the side effects I have experienced will pass in time. Since my diagnosis, the good days, days when the side effects don't consume me, have outnumbered my bad days. And there are many reasons why staying alive is so important to me. One is that I'm a mother to young children. My will to live for my children is worth suffering to me. I will take on many more side effects if I get to stay on a particular drug longer. This is one more month I get to participate in the raising of my children. One more day I get to see their smiles, hear their laugh, and show them my love. I am also young and I still have a good immune system. I try to prolong each drug I am on for as long as possible. I have yet to encounter a side effect that would be bad enough for me to ask to stop taking the drug or to end a treatment earlier than recommended. There are many factors I use when making treatment decisions. My overall strategy is to stay on each chemo drug for as long as I can. I try to stretch the use by including other treatments. When I was diagnosed with the brain metastases, it was determined that my current systemic treatment was still controlling the cancer in the rest of my body. Instead of abandoning Herceptin and Perjeta, I underwent whole brain radiation and added Xeloda to the drug regimen. Instead of switching targeted therapy drugs for the skin metastases, I added heat therapy and targeted radiation. Instead of switching targeted therapy for the lymph node progression, I added a local radiation. So far, this has given me an additional year on the same targeted therapy drugs. My overall goal is to prolong my life, and I am doing this by carefully considering other approaches with my oncologist before abandoning systemic treatments I take that may still be somewhat effective. Common and uncommon side effects from this drug do not play a major role in my treatment decisions. Their effectiveness in prolonging my life is the most important criteria that I consider when choosing a treatment plan. As long as I stay on my targeted therapy, I can endure the side effects of the other treatments. As a stage 4 breast cancer patient with major progression, I am much more likely to die from the breast cancer than a side effect of the treatment. I'll take my chances in regards to the serious risks. I would much rather try a treatment in the hopes of prolonging my life long enough to see a cure. Thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to share my experience.
Thank you, Colleen. Susan?
My name is Susan Ferris, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you so much for letting me speak today. I really appreciate it. 30% of women who are diagnosed with early breast cancer will move on to metastatic status. I am the 6% who is diagnosed right out the door as metastatic. I am HER2 positive, and I was diagnosed on January 2012 at age 47. The cancer had not only formed in my breast, but it had covered my entire liver. I was immediately put onto weekly Taxol and Herceptin treatments that lasted for 24 weeks. The side effects of this were severe and got worse over time. I experienced extreme neuropathy of my hands and feet so bad that I would often fall over and I could not button my own shirt or pick up small items or put on jewelry. I had extreme pervasive fatigue. I had steroid-induced bouts of mania, and acne covered my body due to steroids. I had acid reflux, constipation, edema in my legs, muscle aches, renewed sciatica, insomnia, loss of taste, hair loss, and nails that lifted, infected, and fell off. These are typical of side effects of systemic chemos. The result was that I was disabled. I was barely able to leave my house or care for myself, and I was increasingly isolated. I became hopelessly depressed, in spite of counseling and antidepressants. The chemo that I was on was extended several times, from 15 weeks to 20 to 24 weeks, and finally I demanded that it be stopped because it was killing me. After this, I was considered stable. I had scar tissue on my liver, and I was maintained on Herceptin, and I could go back to working full-time, and the neuropathy went away. The side effects of Herceptin are minor. I had some sinus issues. I had some fatigue. That was about it. But then in November 2013, I had what I call a flare-up. I refuse to use the word progression. Anyway, and when I was told that I had a 5-centimeter mass on the dome of my liver at the appointment with my oncologist, I began to ask questions. I had a list of questions, but instead I broke down into sobs. And I told her repeatedly I did not want to go on to a systemic chemo again. The treatment that she put me on to was Kadcyla, which is a targeted chemo. The negative impacts of this chemo are mostly limited to the cancer itself, although it does have some systemic effects. There is no such thing as no side effects. It is a question of severity. So I experienced minor fatigue, mild neuropathy, acid reflux, minor constipation, elevated liver enzymes, and lowered platelets. My oncologist has reduced the dosage a few times to minimize the neuropathy and the elevated liver enzymes and the lowered platelets, but the treatment, knock on wood, is continuing to work. These side effects are easily treated with Prilosec for the acid reflux. Constipation is treated with stool softener, and I use supplements such as alpha-lipoic acid and vitamin B6 for the neuropathy. As long as I can live my life and continue to work full-time, that is my goal. My focus is on quality of life when I'm choosing a new treatment. The average survival time for a metastatic breast cancer patient is 2.5 years. I've exceeded that. So I, in the time that I have left, would like to live a quality life, not one where I'm suffering. I judge potential treatments based on high potential benefit, but also significant immediate negative side effects. If a treatment has higher immediate negative impacts that would severely limit my life, I will not choose that treatment, even if the treatment would prolong my life. Neuropathy is one of my greatest fears. Medicines or supplements can do little to treat neuropathy at this point. And since I am very prone to this side effect, if a treatment has that as a side effect, I will experience it. I would rather my oncologist reduce the dosage on a treatment and risk the cancer growing than to continue on a higher dosage and risk permanent neuropathy. The factors I consider when choosing a treatment are the possible long-term impact against the severity of immediate side effects, the likely length of my life, and the percentage of patients who may suffer that long-term side effect. Acceptable risk for me, for instance, is the heart toxicity of Herceptin. 34% of patients treated with Herceptin have that experience, but it has a significant progression-free survival time. Plus, the heart toxicity fits into my goal of dying of a heart attack instead of cancer. I've announced this goal to my oncologist, and when I first met my cardiologist, I told him this was my plan. His response was for him to ask me to let him know when I would like to schedule that. I knew I'd met my man. And if a side effect is manageable with medicines that do not themselves have significant side effects, then that is acceptable as well. I balance between staying alive and living with quality of life. I focus on targeted treatments. Because of the minimal side effects and high benefit of targeted therapies such as Herceptin, pertuzumab, Tyverb, and Kadcyla, these are my focus. My hope is that these type of treatments are moved quickly into market so that I can continue to live. I regularly search clinicaltrials.gov, PubMed, and scan Twitter looking for the current research on these therapies, things that have not even made it to PubMed yet. My goal is to stay away from systemic chemos, that's just my preference, due to their extreme side effects for me and their disabling qualities. When I've exhausted targeted treatments and only have systemic chemotherapy as a choice, I will try one or two of these treatment types. But if my quality of life is greatly minimized by these treatments, I will turn these systemic chemos down and I will choose the right to die.
Thank you, Susan. Any final remarks?
Nope.
Thank you very much. Elizabeth?
Good afternoon. My name's Elizabeth Capelle. I was diagnosed with early stage 2 invasive ductal carcinoma. I have no family history of breast cancer or of any type of cancer whatsoever. Like Susan, I was supposed to die of heart disease. But instead, I have breast cancer. I was checked for the BRCA1 and 2 gene, and I am negative for that. I was diagnosed in March of 2003. I have 4 children. I had 4 young children at that point, and my youngest was 3 months old. She's now 12. And I am also triple positive for HER2. I had a lumpectomy and radiation in the beginning with the stage 2 invasive ductal carcinoma. I had no lymph node involvement, and I had clean borders. So I was looking pretty good. I was fine for about 3.5 years. When I first was diagnosed, I had adriamycin and Cytoxan AC, which is the normal thing. 4 rounds. The reactions were hair loss. I actually lost my hair 3 times from chemo. Mouth sores, nausea, vomiting, fatigue, low blood counts, the usual. Radiation, fatigue, and skin blistering. I was on tamoxifen for 3.5 years, and then I had a recurrence. When I had a routine mammogram, they found DCIS of my right breast. It was in my right breast to begin with. And I asked for a PET scan, which they didn't think was important, but I demanded a PET scan, and it showed a benign hemangioma on my liver. So we went ahead with a bilateral mastectomy with reconstruction. A week later, I had a deep vein thrombosis of my right leg. 3 days later, I passed out in the doctor's office with a bilateral pulmonary embolism. I needed a Greenfield filter, which I was very young for since I was early 40s. A few months later, my blood work showed that I had increased liver enzymes, and in fact, I did have liver metastases, so the mastectomies were not actually needed. I had an MRI of the liver. It showed that about 3/4 of my liver was involved, with only a few liver cells that were actually viable. I was told at that point that I would have, at best, 2 years to live. That was from Fox Chase and my primary doctors, oncologists. 2 years at best to live. During that time, I would be on chemo continuously, and quality of living would be really bad, and that I would no longer ever have hair again. As you can see, I have a really nice head of hair right now. So that was almost 9 years ago, which is pretty incredible. What I had for treatment would be Nevelbine and Herceptin right after that. I had extreme reactions to that, loss of finger and toenails also, which my toenails are still not normal. Very bad reaction, shaking on infusion, they call it shake and bake. Increased blood pressure, red face and neck. They slowed the infusion, added Benadryl and Decadron. Mouth sores, vomiting, fatigue, body pain, neuropathy. I went on to Tykerb, Xeloda, also loss of nails, bad joint pain. And then we just went on Doxil and Herceptin. Doxil actually was one of the more gentle drugs for me. I had hair loss, nausea, fatigue, infusion reactions. We used Zofran a lot. But then we continued on with Herceptin. With Doxil, we got to a point about 3 years ago, where the everything was progressing and the liver mets were still growing and we couldn't get them under control. So we used Doxil and we threw in something unusual. We threw in a CyberKnife. Now with metastatic breast disease, you don't typically do CyberKnife or radiation to the site of the problem with the liver, but we decided that why not try it. So we did the CyberKnife. Problem with the CyberKnife was I was coming off of Doxil, so there was a lot of fatigue, but also that I had 3 to 4 ribs that were broken. Now that plays into, would you have chosen a different alternative to treatment? They weren't aware that this could happen. So I now have definitely three ribs that are broken permanently, which means that they disintegrated. So I need to have things for pain management. So I have nerve ablations done every 3 to 4 months to manage that pain because my ribs flail. I stayed on Herceptin after that, but I became very toxic to Herceptin, which is unusual, and I couldn't stay on it any longer. And that is the plan, that you stay on the Herceptin. But I had one of the worst reactions they've ever seen, and I went to Sloan and saw Larry Norton, who was one of the people who did work on Herceptin from the beginning. And he said it's one of the worst reactions he's ever seen. I completely dump all of my histamine and get terrible body pain where I can't move. So we decided to stop it, and that was over 2 years ago. So I am on no treatment whatsoever right now. I get checked every 4 weeks for my cancer markers, my 27, 29s. I get scans every 3 months. Right now I have 0 to 1 circulating tumor markers, which means there's no sign of cancer in my body. My liver mets are completely gone. It comes back, no sign of metastatic disease. And my bone scans have been clean for years. So right now I just stay on this course of treatment, or non-treatment, I should say. And I think it's really important to get that information out there, because it's scary as anything to have metastatic disease and to have 4 young children and to just want to live. So there's absolutely chance for everyone to have survival, and you just have to keep plugging away. And research and development is key to this, and I thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Shirley?
Hello, everyone. My name is Shirley Mertz. Before I begin, I want to pay tribute to the 108 women and men who will die today of metastatic breast cancer. My journey with breast cancer began 24 years ago when I was diagnosed with early stage in 1991. Because I wanted to survive, I decided to have a bilateral mastectomy. And 12 years later, my metastatic disease appeared in 2003. And I received treatment then for, consisting of capecitabine as the chemotherapy, targeted therapy, Herceptin, and palliative radiation. My metastatic disease presented in my spine and quickly spread throughout my skeleton and into my liver. After about a year of treatment, I went into complete remission and remained so for 7.5 years. Approximately a year ago, I had a progression of my disease into a lymph node, and after biopsy, it was discovered that my cancer had mutated, and I added a different treatment. Because of having only one lesion in my body, I decided to undergo stereotactic radiation therapy, which removed the lymph node. And so I now have a treatment regimen that includes the Herceptin, or I should say trastuzumab, bisphosphonate for bones that I've been on for quite some time, and a anti-estrogen agent called exemestane. To me, the most significant downsides of of an anti-hormonal agent are what we've heard so far, bone and joint pain, difficulty sleeping, and, as I've learned recently, a negative impact on one's immune system. Trastuzumab has had some issues on my heart, but I am able to continue receiving that treatment. Of course, my kidneys have to be watched because of the zoledronic acid. And for radiation, stereotactic radiation, I did experience 3 weeks of intense fatigue, which we've all tried to explore today of what that means. For me, it was difficulty doing household chores, taking care of my elderly mother, who I'm responsible for, and going anywhere outside the house. So while treatments have certainly lengthened my life, I have lived now 11 and a half years with metastatic breast cancer, and I truly feel blessed. At the same time, I know that they can have a significant impact on my internal organs, my vital organs, and my daily system. Of course, I still feel that I'm glad to be here as opposed to be not. And as a side effect, of course, I guess an inconvenient side effect, one's life, as we've heard today for metastatic patients, has to be arranged around weekly visits to the hospital for infusions, medical tests, and visits with doctors. I chose to be treated at a comprehensive cancer center, which is an hour from my home, and I have visited that place every 3 weeks since 2004. Because treatments, as well as the mental challenges of metastatic disease, have had an impact on my ability to fall asleep. So I take prescription medication each night to fall asleep. I do take a daily vitamin D to strengthen my bones. I try to walk each day to support my bone care, as well as to help with fatigue, though that was counterintuitive to me when someone told me that. I also participate in cognitive therapy with a social worker to try to cope with the fact that I worry about progression, and I also have to deal with the fact that my life will be shortened by this disease. I practice daily meditation and visualization and prayer. Those I consider all part of my supportive integrative medicine to my clinical treatments. While I consider my goals in treatment to live as long as possible with the best quality of life. However, I must say that in making treatment decisions, when I reflected on preparing for today, when I first heard I had metastatic disease, I was so angry, so shocked, because I thought, what more could I have done with my initial diagnosis in '91 was ductal carcinoma in situ. And I thought, okay, how could this be that it came back? So when I met with my first oncologist and he suggested a treatment, I was ready to go. Sure, whatever you say, I want to take action. And now I've since discovered, I had no really information about metastatic breast cancer at the time. I relied on my doctor to make the first decision. And then I started going on the internet, finding sources of information which are not always available back then for metastatic patients. Things are somewhat better today, but still most oncologists do not hand anything to a patient about their disease. And so now I approach decision-making a little different. For example, with my lymph node, even though it was biopsied and I could have entered a clinical trial because of the mutation, I decided not to because of the severe toxicity that I read about. So I chose to go in another direction with the radiation cyberknife, or whatever you would like to call it. I think it's important for patients to consider what the doctor is suggesting. Why is he or she suggesting a treatment? Is there an option? What toxicities can I expect? Can those toxicities be addressed by over-the-counter medication, or in many cases the dosage can be reduced, or treatment stop for a while. If there are really serious, in the questions it was asked, what would you do about very serious potential toxicities like liver or kidney failure, blood clots, or heart attacks? Those would be deal breakers for me because I, for example, have heart disease in my family, and you can't live without liver or working liver or kidney.
Thank you, Shirley.
I have one more comment,
okay, sure.
and I understand the time. I think for each of us, metastatic disease is unique. I just want to say to the panel, metastatic patients are used as the participants in clinical trials to find out if the drugs that pharmaceuticals are exploring will reduce the size of a tumor. For us, you asked what would be your ideal treatment in the future. We would like to see treatments that prevent the outgrowth of our metastatic spread. And that is different than the reduction of a tumor. Because we feel that until a treatment can be found, a cure can be found, we are willing to live with this disease if it doesn't spread any further than where it is when we find it, when it's found. And so long as we can keep it from attacking organs, that's the type of drug that metastatic patients would like. And we would like the FDA to support clinical trials for that. And final point, when I've asked pharmaceuticals, why don't you develop drugs like this? I've been told that clinical trials do not permit that type of endpoint. So I want to use this platform to please ask you to reconsider endpoints that prevent metastatic outgrowth. And I thank you for your opportunity today to comment.
Thank you, Shirley. Thank you again to all of our Topic 2 panelists for sharing these stories again. And as I said with the Topic 1 panelists, you are all just very, very strong and brave people for coming here and sharing such personal stories with us. So thank you. So could we give everyone could we give our panelists a round of applause? And similar to what we did in the first half of the day, can we see by a show of hands how many of you felt as if your experiences are, that you shared similar experiences to those shared by the panelists? Okay, so we see a few hands raised here. Thank you. Okay, so what we'll do now is we'll do another polling question. Are the clickers working? Okay. Okay, so we're going to give the clickers a try. Okay. Have you ever used any of the following cancer treatments to help reduce or control the spread of your breast cancer? And we definitely have touched upon many of these. So let's just get a count for what we're seeing. A, chemotherapy. B, radiation therapy. C, surgery to remove the tumor or tumors or any part of the breast. D, targeted drug therapy. E, hormone therapy. F, other. G, I have not undergone any cancer treatments. Or H, I'm not sure. So I think they can choose multiple, okay, so you can choose multiple responses here. Thanks, Teresa. Okay. Okay, so here's what we're seeing for the perspectives in the room. Looks like the majority of you, over 90% of you, have undergone chemotherapy and surgery, followed by radiation therapy. And then we're seeing about over half of the people in the room that responded also used targeted drug therapy or hormone therapy. And then we also have some other treatments listed here. Is that similar to what we're seeing on the web?
About 66% chemotherapy, 90% surgery, 45% radiation therapy, 22% targeted drug therapy, and 55% hormone therapy.
Okay, great. Thank you. So, as I mentioned, you all have brought up many of your experiences using these range of therapies. So, what I'd like to ask is instead of focusing on instead of me asking a question focusing on just one of these particular treatments, could one of you begin to share with us how this particular treatment, whatever treatment it is that you have used that you'd like to comment on, how is that managing your breast cancer? Yes, Catherine.
I was diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer. I was a de novo presentation, as we learned. That's unusual. Only about 10% of patients have this. Surgery is not standard of care for metastatic breast cancer. At the time that I was diagnosed in 2009, it was thought that there was some benefit. So after I had been stable on my treatment for, I think it was like 6 months, I was given the option of having a mastectomy, unilateral mastectomy. It was stressed this was not curative. It was not known if it would be beneficial for me. So I did research. Another patient with a similar diagnosis really did the research. She had collected all of the scholarly papers. I read the papers. I felt confident in my decision. One thing that was hard to quantify was psychologically, I wanted the surgery. I think that's hard to understand, even though logically, no benefit, potentially no promises. I wanted this cancer out of me. So I did have the surgery, close margin, so I also had radiation. Reconstruction was not an option. The reason, and as far as I know, I don't think it particularly harmed me. I don't know if it helped me. Meanwhile, last year, I believe, at the San Antonio Breast Cancer Symposium, at the time of my surgery, there was no prospective data on mastectomy in the metastatic setting. At the San Antonio conference, they presented the results of the first prospective study, and basically they found there really wasn't much benefit, or it wasn't sufficient benefit. So I look back on that and I tried to think, well, first of all, it shows you how things change even in such a short time period. But also I look back on that and I think it illustrates the difficulty of making a decision. But also I think I have no regrets about the decision. I believe it was the correct one for me. I think one of the hardest things to quantify is patient preference, and I was grateful that that was given to me. But I can't prove that it helped me. I hope that it did. But again, when we are talking about the decision-making process, I think my experience illustrates some of the challenges.
Thank you, Catherine. Would anybody else like to share their experiences on the treatment that they've undergone?
Hi, I'm Cindy, and I'm very fortunate to be a 20-year breast cancer survivor. I was diagnosed with an early but very aggressive cancer 20 years ago that was treated very aggressively. Respectfully, I really think we need to look at the differences between metastatic patients and early breast cancer patients, because it's one disease, but there are many forms of it. I likely had triple-negative disease, which still has no targeted therapy, but it wasn't consistently tested for back then. 20 years later, I have all of the symptoms that were listed on the chart before. Would I have made decisions differently? I don't know, because nobody told me what those outcomes might be, and I don't know that it would have mattered when I had 2 young children. But now that I am who I am, I might make a different decision. So I just want to say we need to think about all the different types of breast cancer. We need to think about the context. So metastatic patients make different decisions than early stage patients. And we also need to think about the diversity in age, ethnicity. So these questions are important, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about them. But these were the most amazing stories I've heard, and I've been doing this for a long time. I think we need to keep that in context.
Thank you so much, Cindy. And in fact, to your point, in just a short while, we'll do exactly that. We'll explore more of the decision making, and we have some questions for you on how you make those decisions based on, various aspects of your life, your age, your family, whatever it may be. Okay, so let me ask you this question. I know that in topic 1, or in the first part of the day, you brought up a range of side effects or downsides that you experience because of the treatments that you're on or that you have taken. And I want to see if you'd like to elaborate on those further, and can you tie them to specifically one of these treatments? For example, you mentioned the loss of sexual interest. You talked about acne. I mean, there's a full range. You talked about pain. I know that one of our panelists mentioned blisters on the feet. So can you explore these further and maybe tell us after you've tried one of the, or you underwent one of these treatments, what was that experience like, and explore those symptoms or explore that downside a little bit further? Would anyone like to comment on any one of these treatments and how you experienced it?
I'm Jami. I had stage 2 breast cancer and currently no evidence of disease. I had chemo and it ended 2 years ago, a little more than that. And I still have some fatigue that I think has to be related. All of my symptoms are so minor that in the one of them is I can't always think of the word that I'm trying to think of, and this is one of those times. In the light of what everyone else is saying here, it's a lot more minor, but I think it is important to see that there's a whole range, and it's not all terrible all the time. I do have some cognitive problems where I can think of the letter that the word starts with, but I can't think of the word. Like it's just so close, but it's not there. And I still sometimes have neuropathy in my feet. It's not like I'm going to trip and fall neuropathy, but it's just like my toes reminding me that I had breast cancer. It's just one more thing. It doesn't happen all the time, but it's that same like weird feeling that I had when I was on Taxol. In surgery, I opted to have a bilateral mastectomy. I would echo what Catherine said so much. There's so much personal choice and just how you feel about it. I was very aware. There was a lot of talk, I think it was maybe at San Antonio last year, that women were not informed enough, and that's why they were choosing bilateral mastectomy, even though there's no survival benefit. And that kind of hurt my feelings, because I didn't make that decision because I was not smart enough to know what my decision was going to have an effect on me. It's because I knew that I would be worried about that mammogram every 6 months. And I have little kids, and I didn't want to be one more thing that I worried about. And I knew cosmetically it would look better if I had the reconstructive done bilaterally at the same time. I've got some aging left to do, and it wouldn't turn out the same if one breast was aging and one was not. And I was really thankful that my doctor could realize that even though I knew it wasn't a survival thing, it was a quality of life thing that was important to me. That being said, the side effects that I noticed the most are because of the surgery. I wouldn't change anything. I think maybe Debbie made the comment that she went through a lot and she wouldn't change it, but she didn't love it. I still have nerve sensation issues. I don't like the seatbelt to touch me, so I have actually worn a groove in the car where I pull it out, and the seatbelt has like cut through the plastic of the seatbelt thing because I just always pull it out because it just bugs me. And so there are a lot of things like that. None of them are deal breakers by any means, but there are a lot of long-term things that you don't think about when you're first diagnosed because you just want it to be gone. And it wouldn't have changed my mind at all, but it's definitely things to consider.
Thank you, Jami. Thank you. Yes. Let's see. Why don't we go to Sandy?
I just want to make a comment about decision making in that my experience has been for most women, they think this is a one-time issue. They're diagnosed, and they're willing to do almost anything to get through it. But majority of women they think it's going to be over. That once the surgery's done, the treatment is done, then my life is going to go back the way it is. They're not prepared for the long-term inconveniences or after effects. They're just not prepared for that. And I think that we need to educate women more about it. That yes, for many women it is. It's over, their life just goes back. But for many, many other women it does not. Reconstruction is an issue that's really not talked about a lot. I'm 30 years, and I'm still dealing with issues of reconstruction. I have pain from that surgery from 30 years ago. That shouldn't be. And no one ever told me that was going to happen.
Thank you, Sandy. FDA panel, any follow-up questions? Janka, go ahead.
Okay, I might be a quick one.
Okay.
I was just wondering if we could get some elaboration on the supportive care treatments. I was particularly intrigued, Ms. Capelle, as if you're not on anything, are there other supportive things that you're doing, even though you're not on chemotherapy now?
So let me actually interject here and say we're going to go on to that. Yes,
okay,
we're going to actually do a polling question, so I'll make sure I get to Elizabeth to answer that
Okay.
question for you, and also others in the audience. But
Okay.
let's. Great question. We'll definitely address that one. Suparna, did you have one that you wanted to ask?
No, I mean, one of the questions was supportive meds. It was regarding, I think I talked to one of the panelists during the break that I was very interested in the patient's decisions regarding holistic and complementary meds and how many have chosen that, and if that's something that you actually discussed with your oncologist or things that people are doing independently, just out of curiosity. The other question that I just did want to ask is, we hear about the side effects a lot, which we know that all of these treatments have, and we're kind of hearing both camps of people willing to take anything, quality of life versus the side effects. But I was just curious, by maybe even a show of hands, how many people have actually changed therapy? I know there's a couple patients up here at the panel, but how many have actually changed therapy because of the side effects? Or is it something that you kind of just push yourself through, knowing that it kind of sucks, you don't like it, it's there, and you do it, but how many actually change the therapy because of the side effects?
Let's do a show of hands. How many have changed therapies because of the side effects? 1, 2, 3, 4.
Exactly, not because of progression of disease or or something, but simply because of the side effects. I'm just curious.
Okay.
Yeah, right. Then yes, because of toxicity.
Okay, great. And we saw about 5 hands raised there. So I think with the questions that have been raised, it's actually a good segue to our next polling question. So let's get our clickers out again. Besides your cancer treatments, what therapies have you taken to help manage your symptoms you have experienced because of your breast cancer or your breast cancer medication? And here again, you can select multiple responses. A, pain medications. B, dietary supplements or diet changes. C, complementary or alternative therapy such as massage or acupuncture. D, herbal remedies such as soy supplements. E, other therapies. Or F, I am not doing or taking any therapies to treat symptoms. Okay. Okay. So it looks like C, complementary or alternative therapy such as massage or acupuncture, is what we see the most of in this room, followed by pain medications and dietary supplements or diet changes. And then there's also some other therapies. So let's make sure we definitely touch on some of those also, followed by herbal remedies. What are we seeing on the web?
100% say they take pain medications, and then about 2/3 dietary supplements or complementary or alternative therapies, and about 1/3 say herbal remedies or other therapies.
Okay, thank you very much. So let's come back to Janka's question and Suparna's question. And Elizabeth, why don't we start with you? And can you talk to us a little bit more about some of these supportive care therapies?
Okay. The pain medications I take for the ribs, but I'm not on any of them now that we found that we can do the nerve ablation. So then I don't need the pain medication. So I'm not on that anymore. There are no dietary supplements other than iron because my iron stores are low. I've done massage, but because of the broken ribs, I can't do massage anymore. They have me on Lupron to keep me in medically induced menopause since I'm triple positive. We're going to do that for at least another year or two. And that's about it.
Would anybody else? Thank you, Elizabeth. Would anybody else like to share? Yes.
So actually, as a result of my breast cancer, one of the positive impacts was all the changes that I made to my lifestyle. So I significantly changed my diet, stopped drinking alcohol, and did a lot of complementary therapies, acupuncture, hands-on healing. The pain medication or I don't remember exactly which pill it was, but I want to touch on this because I was very concerned about becoming addicted, and so I just stopped taking it. And after 2 or 3 days, I thought I was hallucinating, and I actually happened to go to my acupuncturist who said, well, the drug you're taking is actually, withdrawals are as bad as heroin. And so I think in taking some of these medications, it would be helpful to have a better understanding of the full life cycle of those drugs, and once you take them, what you need to do to come off of them, and some of the other effects. So I am a big proponent of these complementary and alternative therapies.
Thank you very much.
I can talk if you want.
Yes, Susan?
Susan Ferris, I don't know if you can hear me. So during my chemotherapy, I mainly sought out complementary therapies by myself. I had acupuncture to deal with the sciatica. I would say stab me in the ass, and I would feel better. It worked. Anyway, so I also took up yoga, which makes a huge difference. And I now work with a supportive care, palliative care doctor. I prefer supportive care. When she brought the priest in the room, that freaked me out. But anyway, she knows that I really don't want the side effects of further medication. So for my neuropathy, she told me to put capsaicin on the bottoms of my feet and for 2 weeks, and that really helped a lot. And we use, the combo of the vitamin B6 and the alpha-lipoic acid to deal with that sort of thing. So I try to use as many complementary therapies as I can, just because they have a lower side effect. And if I do ever get to the point of needing pain meds, God help me, because of all the side effects of the opioids, the constipation, the fact that it just knocks you out. I luckily live in D.C., which has now legal marijuana, and I hope it stays that way. But we also have medicinal marijuana, and I would want to try that first before anything else.
Thank you, Susan. So I think we had another comment here.
Thank you. So I've tried a number of complementary therapies, having gone through chemotherapy, radiation, and now on hormonal therapies. So I've done yoga quite a bit. As a matter of fact, I was just with a group at Smith Center and we were doing the whole yoga filming. And so not only have I tried it through a support group, which is in many ways a type of therapy for some people, that I host a support group monthly, and I share these things to try and encourage others to try them. Because when you look at it from an ethnicity standpoint, African Americans still are reticent about many complementary therapies, and it's in part the way it's presented. If you think of yoga, 9 times out of 10 when you see a display or advertising on yoga, it's not a person who looks like me. And it brings up the point, not criticizing, but I am a little curious as to how the panel on this side, as well as the women who spoke, were chosen. Because, again, when I look around, and if I don't see many people that look like me, it makes me wonder, then are my concerns, issues really being addressed? Because we all know that breast cancer, or cancer in general, is not monolithic. it affects everyone differently. And so when we have these type of forums, I really feel it's important that it's representative of the population that we're serving, and particularly since we're here in the nation's capital, where the numbers and statistics on breast cancer are off the chart. And then the other kinds of CAMs or complementary therapies I've tried, of course, is exercising, massaging, acupuncture, because I have lymphedema. Decided not to wear my sleeve today. I have to do a lot of lymphedema therapy. As a matter of fact, when I was undergoing radiation treatment daily, I had to do lymphedema therapy weekly. And I've done water aerobics, and the other ones are so this is chemo brain now that I can't think of the other ones, but I am really interested and big on pushing complementary therapies because of the amount of toxicity that's not involved with them.
Thank you so much for sharing those comments. Thank you. So let's take a few more comments, and I'll also check in with the web before we move on to our next discussion. I know several of you chose other therapies. You chose other, not only for these, you know, these supportive care therapies, but you also chose other for the, you know, for the first polling question that we had on treatments that you're undergoing. Would anybody like to share some of these other therapies that you are trying or that you're using that are or are not working for you?
Was that included in the other, the bisphosphonates, because they're quite commonly used now, but I didn't see it here.
Is that, would that be in this polling question, or would that be in the one previous to this one?
Like the bone strengthening and stuff, because I mean that's I mean I've been taking that, and I think it's
It can actually go under probably both. You know?
Okay.
Yeah, it's going to be both because it's helping strengthen you know, the bones and treating the disease, you know, from the metastatic disease, but it's also helping with the symptoms, so the pain and everything. So I think you're absolutely right. It could be in both.
Yeah. So I mean, I take that. I would consider it, you know, one of the other therapies that it has been. I think quite, you know, I feel it's helped me.
Okay, thank you for bringing that up. And I'm sorry, I didn't catch the name of what you just said. What was the name of the... Oh, okay. Does anybody else in the audience, by show of hands, is anybody else taking that therapy? 3. Okay, so we have about 3 people in the audience doing that. Okay. Anything else before we move on to any other therapies? Yes.
When I was undergoing chemotherapy treatment, I did go into early menopause because of the chemotherapy and had hot flashes. And, you know, since I didn't have a lot of the other symptoms really bad, I just kind of thought it was not a big deal. And I'm thankful that my oncologist really prodded me, and instead of trying to sort of under-report the side effects, wanted to be sure that I mentioned anything that was manageable. And so I did take gabapentin at night for the hot flashes, and then eventually took an antidepressant in the morning because apparently the antidepressant wouldn't let me sleep well, so I would take that in the morning and then take gabapentin that would knock you out at night. And that made it a lot more manageable. And so, you know, it was not a complementary therapy, but it really made some of the side effects so much more manageable for me that I think that was important. And in the support group that I attend, there are a lot of, it's for women who have young children. And there are several women there who take antidepressants just to manage the anxiety of the diagnosis with, especially the women who have very, very little children. That's a lot of energy expended, and it's very tough for them. And I think being very proactive about the use of antidepressants and, you know, keeping in mind that it, a lot of times it's a short-term thing, but it's an important thing for quality of life. For one of my friends, it made a huge difference. So.
Thank you, Jami. So let's actually move on to our next, what we're going to do here, because many of you have brought up this, we've talked about decision making and the factors that you consider and what's important to you in choosing a particular treatment. So what we would like to do is pose a scenario question for you. And we've already sort of touched on, you've already sort of touched on some of these aspects, but let's spend some time exploring it further. So let's go to this one. And I'm going to read this to you and let you know beforehand that we're not providing you with a whole lot of information here. but we want to hear the first things that come to mind after we finish reading this. So drug X is a chemotherapy drug being developed for patients with breast cancer, and it was studied in a clinical trial comparing standard of care chemotherapy plus drug X versus standard of care alone. The clinical trial's results showed that the addition of this drug X prolonged survival on average 2 months longer. In addition to toxicities related to standard of care chemotherapy, patients treated with drug X had more diarrhea and rash and had more rare but serious toxicities, such as liver injury and lung inflammation. So again, we know there's not a lot of information here, but can you tell us what are the first things that come to mind, even if that first thing that comes to mind is a question? Okay, sure. So let's go through this again. Drug X is a chemotherapy drug being developed for patients with breast cancer. It was studied in a clinical trial comparing standard of care chemotherapy plus drug X versus standard of care alone. In the clinical trials, it showed that the addition of drug X prolonged survival on average 2 months longer. So the median survival was 12 months on drug X plus standard of care versus 10 months for standard of care alone. However, in addition to the toxicities related to the standard of care chemotherapy, patients treated with drug X had more diarrhea and rash and had more rare but serious toxicities, such as liver injury and lung inflammation. Okay, so
please use the microphone so
use
the
the
people on the
microphone.
webcast can hear you.
I'd like to know how this is being used. Is it a first-line treatment, or is it something for metastatic patients who've undergone prior treatments? I think that makes a difference.
okay, let's see, Shirley?
Well, you're not going to do full first, right? You don't mind if you have comments?
Go ahead. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Please share your comments.
Well, I mean, I think it shouldn't matter whether it's early stage or advanced stage. Only 2 months more, that's, to me, not enough to warrant the added cost. And I have yet to meet a cancer drug that doesn't cost much. So, and secondly, I think a significant point here is the added toxicity, more diarrhea. How much? It doesn't tell us. Rash and serious toxicities are possible. So, I mean, if I was presented with this option, even though I want to live a longer time, I would say this is not an option for me. What else do you have?
Okay. Thank you, Shirley. Yes, Elizabeth.
Well, I'd like to know, it's saying 2 months longer. However, I think that could very much be wrong, because in my situation they said in certain drugs I would get 6 months longer, and I'm 8.5 years out. So if you're saying the average person, what if you're not the average person? What if you're the outlying person? Then you're not going to take that chance of 2 months where maybe you would end up being me and not being 2 months. So I think that it's skewed. The numbers are skewed. You're saying that there's maybe an 80% chance that you won't go longer, but what if you're in that 20% chance that you can live longer? Then it's worth that. So the 2 months may necessarily not be you. You may be the 20 months, and in that case, it is worth it. So I think that's very skewed.
Okay, very good to know. Yes,
Can
Shirley.
I have to add
Yes.
this, because this is what I dream about. Sitting in front of the FDA panel and being able to say this. I kid you not, okay? I kid you not. What I want you to think about, we have genomic sequencing now. Why can't clinical trials, within the context of a clinical trial, a pharmaceutical be required to follow its patients who do well and know something about their genetic makeup that distinguishes between good responders, I shouldn't say good, efficacious responders and those that are not. So that in the case of like an Elizabeth, maybe there are 10 more Elizabeths out there who would respond, And when my doctor and I looked at this, the results of this clinical trial, that ultimately the drug was approved by the FDA, but now as a patient, knowing my genetic sequence or my makeup of my tumor, I then can make a more intelligent decision of whether would I be benefit, would I be an outlier, or would I really not gain much other than 2 months? And I mean, that's the promise of the future. It will require more, but the cost of genetic sequencing has come down, so it is doable. It would mean that clinical trials would be more, I think, could have fewer people in them, less costly, and be more informative to both the doctor, the physician, and the patient. So thank you. One of my bucket lists has been fulfilled.
Oh, thank you, Shirley.
I need to respond to Shirley also. She's absolutely right, because I've just had genetic testing, and they said that they would like to do some studies on me to find out if there's something different in me that is actually working. And so that's what we're looking into, and I said I would more than be happy to be a test subject, you know, because if I can help with that, that's extremely important. So I am willing to take all my blood and figure it out.
Okay. Thank you, Elizabeth. We have several more hands here, so let's just go in order. Okay.
I just want to reinforce what both Shirley and Elizabeth said, because my first question would be, who's in the clinical trial? And how do they compare to me? And to some of the earlier points, for folks of different ethnicities and races, they are so underrepresented in clinical trials. So I just want to highlight that. I mean, I've actually been doing some research on that for a class I'm taking, and I was actually shocked to see the numbers. And I actually got my data by going on clinicaltrials.gov. So again, who is in the clinical trial, and how do I know if I'm the high or low end of the average or not affected at all?
Okay.
Here.
Okay. We'll have Katie, and then we'll come this way. Okay.
Ladies, I have been in contact actually with a woman who is in Harvard, I think, associated with Harvard. They are trying to do a huge database at the moment. I'll give you some information here where you can contact her. And they're actually using the breast cancer cohort of patients because I guess, you know, we're easy to contact and whatever. And they will take your information from you and use it for that very purpose. And this thing is being sort of spearheaded as we speak. So it is out there. It's being done.
Thank you, Katie. Yes, Ginny?
Hi. I absolutely agree with what Shirley and Elizabeth have said, but I just have like a general statement I wanted to make that, you know, I think for too long we're accepting these drugs that, you know, show 2 or 3 months of progression-free survival, maybe not even overall survival, and, you know, they're more expensive. You know, they're not, you know, I don't care if you happen to be an outlier. You know, it's just not acceptable. You know, they're really, for the cost of drugs and for what patients have to go through, you know, we can't be happy with a couple of months and think that this is really progress. You know.
Thank you, Jim.
I mean, I think that's got to end.
So I'm seeing a lot of heads nodding to that. Okay. And we'll take another comment here. Yep.
Hi, thanks. And when we talk about a dream of getting before FDA, not just before FDA, but NCI, CDC, and all of them, I'd really like to see more people of color in clinical trials. The data is significantly skewed. And when we think about how long we've been dealing with breast cancer or cancer in general, and in 2015, the percentage of African American or people of color is less than 2%, there's something wrong with that. And we're all intelligent people, so we don't have to wonder why. But we need to look at the methodology, the way we're approaching people, and really think about how serious are we in eradicating the disease, period. And if we have to do that, we have to look across the board. We have to look at more evidence-based information as to why people of color are not involved. And then we have to actually take those steps based on what has been said to ensure that they're involved. I'm a community navigator. I have never been asked by any of my doctors, would you like to be in a clinical trial? So I've had to explore that on my own. So no one has asked me, and I'm articulate and educated, what about little Miss Mary in public housing, or Rosetta, who has a language challenge, or a Japanese or other nationality who have all of their cultural barriers? There's something wrong with that. And the FDA want to spend more time and money looking at that so that we can have better representation in this, if we want to really get rid of the disease. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we've heard some really, really great comments about diversity in clinical trials, perhaps genomic testing to understand how people that are in the clinical trials relate to you as a patient and how it would impact you specifically if you took this particular drug. Any other comments before? Yes, let's do Karen, and then we'll move on to a polling question.
Mine goes back to the genetic testing, the genomic testing on that. When I was in my first clinical trial, the average time to disease progression was about 8 months. They had one person go 24 months. I went 6 years on it, and the drug manufacturer was not interested in doing genomic testing to see why I was the one that responded for 6 years out of 240 people.
Thank you, Karen.
Probably because of the expense of the drug.
So, Jeff, I believe you had a question?
Right. I think it ties into this perfectly, because I think we are at the genomic age, certainly, but it's also interfacing with the immunology age, along with the proteomic age, along with every other omic, and we're finally getting the sense of check the tumor out. And I think we kind of take it for granted, but breast cancer actually is leading personalized medicine. HER2 is one of the key innovative discoveries in cancer development in the last decade, and really has changed the poorest prognosis subgroup to one of the better prognosis because of accurate drug development and accurate selection of the patients. But it also comes at a cost too, because a lot of the genomic material that we want is from the tumor. And so in order to do that, across the standard of care in clinical practice, when someone's diagnosed with metastatic disease in the setting of a previously diagnosed, clinical practice says go get a biopsy to make sure that the markers are the same as it was in the diagnostic era. And then each subsequent progression or flare, as you eloquently put it, yes, exactly. Do you want to check to see whether resistance mutations or some type of character mutations? But I was wondering if we could get it like the patient experience with all these biopsies and undergoing multiple biopsies, and the uncertainty and the risk and anxiety that comes along with that, especially has there been any negative aspects to undergoing biopsies just for the sake of determining mutation status or biomarker status?
Thank you, Jeff, for your question. Shirley?
I do considerable advocacy work with the Translational Breast Cancer Researchers Consortium, and it has like 19 comprehensive cancer centers, et cetera. And the patient advocates, and I happen to be metastatic, but most of them are not metastatic. There's one per center. We have all said to oncologists, if you explain to your patients the value of a biopsy and the fact that treatment is impacted by the information you get with a biopsy, that patients will willingly undergo it, assuming it's not, the biopsy itself is not a dangerous, place where you can't get to it, or it could have some really bad effect. I mean, you've heard in the room here today how strong women are to survive, not only for themselves, but for their families, their partners, their spouses. And I mean, we're strong enough that once we hear that there is a possibility that your progression could be different than your previous cancer, or even in early stage, without an accurate diagnosis, you don't get the personalized or precision type of treatment. So I don't think requiring biopsies in clinical trials, that is a must too. And so you can tell I'm very passionate about it. I happen to be one person who's mutated twice now, presented differently in my metastatic setting, and the last progression I've talked about, I'm different again. So, and I know I'm in the minority, but it does happen. Thank you.
In your experiences with the biopsies, and were things carefully explained to you? Were they carefully laid out for you? Was there any areas of confusion that should have been better delineated in your experience?
Well, I happened to be treated at a comprehensive cancer center where the oncologist did explain the value of a biopsy. In fact, she said to me initially, I will not, I came to her as a second opinion, she said, I will not recommend any treatment until I know more about your tumor. And so I think that is helpful. And it doesn't always happen in community settings. And so there's a really need for educating the oncologists about what they could do better, so they just don't throw a treatment at the patient, but rather really select it carefully. Thank you.
Thank you, Shirley. Yes. Yes, Janka.
Hi. Just wanted to share with our audience that FDA does take the issue of diversifying clinical trials very seriously. We have an action plan that was announced last August that has 3 priority areas. The first being to improve data quality, get people in the trials. Second, to look at what the barriers to participation are and work with regulated industry to advance this. And the third is greater transparency of data. And I just want to highlight an initiative that CEDAR has in place, the Drug Snapshots site, that does bring greater transparency to inclusion. We're not going to fix this problem overnight. The agency will not fix this alone, but working with stakeholders, with regulated industry, with advocates, I think we can really, looking ahead, make a big difference. So I just want to make sure that everyone's aware that the agency is actively engaged in this and looking for solutions.
Thank you, Janka. Okay, we'll take one more comment and then we'll move on to our next question.
For me, having the bone biopsy was transformational. I mean, I had been on the anti-hormone treatments because of my previous PR-positive cancer as a primary. But, I think about that year's time, where I was on those treatments, and it was kind of, I was never really satisfied that treatments were going well. But I was the one who had to talk to my oncologist. She was fantastic. She listened to me. We made an informed decision. I actually went to Dr. Lisa Carey in North Carolina. We did the research. The biopsy itself I had absolutely no problems with it, but I think it's so important. And I think it's still being left up too much to the oncologists. I think patients are not informed enough, and I don't know what the insurance status is for people. I was able to get paid by my insurance, but it's this constant battle between what we can do, what we can afford to do, and patients are kind of a lot of the time left in the dark. I think we need to be more informed.
Thank you, Katie. So I've been given the okay that we have 10 more minutes. So within those 10 minutes, what I'd like to do is we have 2 more questions for you, polling questions for you, and then we'll check in with the web and see if anybody would like to dial in. So on that note, for those of you on the web, if you'd like to call in, please go ahead and do so. So again, we've touched on some of these already, but we'll explore this just a little bit more. So here's the question for you. And please have your clickers out. Of the following factors, which 2 would you rank as most important to your decisions about using treatments to help reduce or control the spread of your breast cancer? Please select up to 2 responses. A, whether the treatment is expected to help relieve the symptoms I experience because of my cancer. B, the small but significant risk of serious side effects associated with treatment, such as blood clots or kidney failure. C, how long the treatment would probably prolong my life. D, how long the treatment could possibly prolong my life for longer than expected. E, the expected side effects of the treatment, such as nausea, loss of appetite, or other. Or F, how the treatment is administered, such as how long the treatment takes, whether it requires hospitalization, requires doctor visits, and so on. Okay. Did everyone have a chance to enter their responses? Okay. Okay. So it looks like 2/3 of those of you responding selected C, how long the treatment would probably prolong my life, followed by D, how long the treatment could possibly prolong my life, and E, the expected side effects of treatment, such as nausea or loss of appetite. How about on the web? What do we see there?
3/4 of participants chose how long the treatment would probably prolong my life and the expected side effects of the treatment, such as nausea. And then 1/4 chose how long it could possibly prolong my life and how the treatment is administered.
Okay, thank you very much. So let's have a few comments on why you selected what you did. So what is it based on? What does this weighing depend on? For example, your age or your prognosis. Would anybody like to share a comment on that? Yes.
Every patient wants to survive, and I kind of had struggled with the difference between C and D. Like, what's the different data between those two?
Okay.
So I think if you added those, you'd have 100%.
Okay. Okay. And Elizabeth, I think I heard you ask, what was the question that I asked, which is, why did you choose what you did? What factors weigh into that decision? So would you like to respond?
I think I speak for most of us here is we want to live. So we base our treatment on what is the best probability of living. And C and D are kind of, they work together in my mind. So I think that's pretty much, if we put those together, again, 100% of us would like to live longer.
Okay. Yes. We have two comments on this side.
I guess I had two things. As part of my treatment, I get a bisphosphonate because I have bone mets, and originally the bisphosphonate that I got was a 20-minute infusion, but it requires a blood test, and it will be an hour or 2 hours at the hospital, and then there was research that came out that found that you could, it was quarterly rather than the monthly that I had been getting it. So I then switched, when it was monthly, a new bisphosphonate came out that was a shot that you got after you had your monthly oncologist visit, you get the shot. It was considerably more expensive, but I felt my time was worth it, so I opted for the shot. Then when the dosing guidance changed that you could have this drug quarterly, I then switched back to the more time-consuming yet cheaper infusion because I only had to do that. Quarterly I could deal with. Monthly it was a pain. But the other thing I would also say that is not perhaps widely understood is that a patient often perceives a drug's effectiveness on how harsh the side effects are. And that is not always true, but patients are not doctors. Patients perceive, I lost my hair, I feel nauseous, I have diarrhea. This is one fantastic drug. And that's not the case. And I know many times I'm asked to speak to newly diagnosed stage 4 women. With stage 4, it's the least toxic option first. And I recall even in my own experience having to tell my insurance company I wasn't going to have surgery, and the administrator, no surgery, you're not going to have chemotherapy. No, I won't. I'll take this daily pill. And she just goes, well, they don't seem to be doing very much for you, are they? And it's not understood that a non-chemotherapy, and anti-estrogen can be equally effective as a chemotherapy, but sometimes a patient doesn't have that choice if they have an aggressive disease, if they have a disease like triple negative where there is no receptor to act upon, then chemotherapy is essentially their only option. But if it's 6 of one, half dozen of another, oftentimes, again, the patient goes through a motion of, this drug You know, they're not looking at the little printout that came with the drug. They're going, well, you know, I look terrible, I feel terrible. This drug is really doing the trick. And I think that's clinicians struggle perhaps to communicate that.
Thank you, Catherine. Let's go on to our next polling question, and then we'll be sure to hear your comment. Okay, so the purpose of this question it's to hear the other side now. So we're going to ask the contrary question here. Of the following factors, which one would you rank as least important to your decisions about using treatments to help reduce or control the spread of your breast cancer? A, whether the treatment is expected to help relieve the symptoms I experience because of my cancer. B, the small but significant risk of serious side effects such as blood clots or kidney failure. C, how long the treatment would probably prolong my life. D, how long the treatment could possibly prolong my life. E, the expected side effects of the treatment, such as nausea or loss of appetite. Or F, how the treatment is administered, such as how long the treatment takes, whether it requires hospitalization or required doctor visits. So here you're going to select one that you would rank as the least important. Okay. Okay, so the least important to your decision was F, how the treatment is administered. And again, we acknowledge and appreciate that there are many, many factors into your decision making. So we appreciate that you're, choosing with one of the options here. So, okay, so let's make sure we hear your perspective.
Thank you. I really think that's interesting because on the previous ones, in addition to what others had said about C and D, F, how the treatment is administered, was a great concern of mine because it was, so how long is this going to take? If I have long-term or temporary employment, is this going to impact that or maybe my insurance? Am I going to lose that? Or is this going to be a free clinical trial kind of thing? Whether it requires hospitalization, where will I be hospitalized? And about the doctors, will I lose the relationship that I have with my current doctors that I'm still kind of struggling with and developing the trust? So when this comes in, do I have to get used to all new doctors again? So those are definitely, and just the transportation issue. Let's say I live in Southwest. I may have to go to Bethesda or NIH. That's a huge stretch. So those are the kind of concerns I have.
Thank you very much. So let me turn to the web, and if you could, what polling results do you see there? And perhaps you could summarize what you're hearing on the web, and then we'll take some phone calls.
Similar to what we had in person, we had 3/4 saying F. That was the most answered thing. We have nobody currently on the phone, so I'm going to summarize some of the comments I'm getting. Going back to something we've been talking about earlier about what do you keep in mind when you're thinking about treatments. We had several comments. We had one person saying it would be nice to be informed ahead of time about side effects, but you're never going to be able to know how your body's going to respond to them. Another person would said it would be nice to know which side effects would not go away after you're done with the treatment. There was one person who said her main concern was her fertility because she was diagnosed when she was 31, but there was no information, no studies that were going to talk about how this would impact her fertility. There was one person who was talking about how the difference between metastatic and non-metastatic patients when they're considering treatment. In terms of other therapies people are taking, people also talked about exercise and yoga and about support and the importance of peer sharing things with other patients to help them overcome isolation and depression. And in response to the question about biopsies, one person said it's different between diagnostic and investigational purposes if you're getting a biopsy. If it's investigational, he would probably consider where the metastatic lesion was located. For example, skin and bone would be a lot easier than a liver biopsy. And then one person talking about genomic medicine said that while they're promising, they're still early. So it's people need to keep in mind that some of these treatments, some of these approaches are very limited for right now.
Okay, thank you very much. So we're going to wrap up this portion of the of the meeting today, and we're going to be moving on to open public comment. But I would just like to, on behalf of all of my FDA colleagues, just thank you all so much for sharing these stories with us and really teaching us so much today. I think, yes, Jeff, yes.
Just a really quick show of hands. Has anybody ever read the little thing that comes with the medicine, also called the drug label? If you have, and any feedback, I know that we're probably going to get a lot, but was it helpful in describing the side effects and the expectations, or I think we're getting a lot of comments, but I just kind of get it. It helps us a lot too.
So let's do a show of hands. Could we do a show of hands? Okay, yes, Elizabeth, Susan?
Just real quickly, I definitely read the side effects on it, and I, try not to freak out. But the thing is, for instance, when I started Capelle, it is so new. It was so, I like to pronounce it Godzilla, like Godzilla. Anyway, but I definitely read what the drug company was putting out. But the fact is that with any of these drugs, they do not talk about everything that is really going to happen. There's stuff that I think either they don't want to admit. A prime example would be Paxil, which is still not admitting how hard the withdrawal off of Paxil is. And so a lot of times I have to look not only at what the drug company provides, but then go off into the forums, to trusted forums, and hear what other people are talking about to find out the real story. There are books that are written on how to withdraw from Paxil, and that's still that's a secret. Anyway, so.
Great. And so, okay, we'll take one more comment.
We discussed that just sort of over the break, and with my last label, I thought, oh my God, this looks different than the last one, but I didn't have the last one to compare. I think the information it's quite technical. It is a lot to consume, and most people, I don't think, let me retract that. The population that I serve, I can assure you a lot of them do not read that, and if they do, their health literacy is not at a level that they can totally comprehend it, so it could be to their advantage.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff, for your question. So thank you all again so much for being part of today's meeting. Kajita, I'll turn it over to you. You can sit here, that's fine.
Are you just going to go? Yeah, that's fine. Hello, everyone. I'd like to thank you all for coming here today. We're now moving into the open public comment session, and for those of you who are not aware, the purpose of this session is to allow an opportunity for those who have not had a chance to speak on issues that are not related to the topic discussion questions today. This is an opportunity for folks who are not a patient or a patient representative to comment. Please keep in mind that we will not be responding to your comments, but they will be transcribed and be a part of the public record. Since we would like this process to be transparent, we encourage you to note any financial interests that you have that are related to your comment. If you do not have any such interests, you may state that for the record. And if you prefer not to provide this information, you can still provide your comments. So we have collected sign up before the meeting and during the break. We have 4 people signed up and about 10 minutes for this session. So please be respectful of your other colleagues here and other patients and stick to the 2-minute limit. We won't have a timer, but I will be using my phone here to keep track of, just so that you don't go over. And if you do approach the 2-minute mark, I will have to ask you to wrap up. So I'll run through the order of speakers, and I apologize if I mispronounce your name. So the order will be first, Joanne Bazaglo, Catherine Crawford-Gray, Kimberly Beer, and then Catherine O'Brien. So first, may I have Joanne Bazaglo to the mic?
Hello, thank you. I do not have any financial disclosures to present. Okay, I applaud you for hosting this meeting today, and I'm very grateful and applaud all the people who spoke up. It is not easy to do so. I bring the voice of over 3,500 patients who have shared their voice in the Cancer Experience Registry. I bring that with me. I would encourage you to strongly consider the comments the cancer support community has submitted to you about integrating distress screening and follow-up into the clinical trial design to ensure that the types of patient-reported outcomes that we've been discussing today are collected in real time and over time, and over the course of disease and treatment, and that so that it can inform their ultimate decisions about medical solutions. One question I would like to specifically respond to is the question about toxicity and risk-benefit trade-off decisions. It is clear from our data that patients, especially with metastatic disease, have unique needs in their cancer journey, and each is willing to tolerate a benefit-risk profile based on very personal considerations. We do know that from our Cancer Experience Registry that over 50% of women living with metastatic breast cancer are unable to work due to their cancer. Meanwhile, they are balancing other very real-life commitments, child care, elder care, etc. Additionally, we know that they have differing definitions of value depending on their experience. As you consider your definition of an appropriate risk-benefit scenario, I encourage you to ensure that it's based on the data emerging from the voice of the patient and move further to collect it in real time and allow it to inform your thinking in ways that may have not been done in the past. So we look forward to partnering with you on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. Next, we have Catherine Crawford-Gray.
Thank you. Thank you so much on behalf of the Metastatic Breast Cancer Alliance. I appreciate this opportunity to make a short statement, and thank you particularly to all the women who have spoken here today. The Metastatic Breast Cancer Alliance is comprised of more than 30 member organizations, many who are in this room or are online today, and these include the 3 largest private funders of breast cancer research in the US, 16 leading advocate nonprofits providing information and support services for breast cancer patients and caregivers, 6 pharmaceutical corporations invested in treatments for metastatic breast cancer, as well as individuals who advocate for and work with patients on a daily basis. And the Alliance applauds the FDA's work to date and its commitment to expanding treatment options for people living with metastatic breast cancer. And we also commend the FDA's dedication to continuous education of its reviewers so that they can focus on the different needs of patients that arise from the various types and stages of breast cancer, and particularly the differences between early stage and metastatic breast cancer. Last year, the Alliance undertook research which was published in October in the report Changing the Landscape for People Living with Metastatic Breast Cancer. And based on this research, we are advocating that in order to accelerate research and treatments benefiting metastatic breast cancer patients, the following aspects of clinical trials be a priority for the FDA. The first aspect is updating clinical trials for metastatic breast cancer, including new trial designs with meaningful endpoints. For example, tumor shrinkage may be but one endpoint relevant to tumor spread or metastasis. Additional endpoints, such as time to next metastasis, need to be introduced. Quality of life measures that are valued by patients living with the disease and inform their treatment decisions need to be additionally standardized and required in all phase 3 trial designs. The second aspect is that there is also a need for multi-center collaborative phase 2 trials. By helping to incentivize multi-institution, multi-investigator trials, metastatic breast cancer research will be accelerated. Barriers to clinical trial design include there being too many Me Too trials in industry and reward systems for single investigators conducting single institution phase 2 trials. These, along with other barriers, need to be removed for research benefiting metastatic breast cancer patients and for the research to be conducted at a faster pace. Accelerating the speed of research and the development of new treatments that extend the lifespan of while maintaining a high quality of life for people living with metastatic breast cancer is a primary goal of the Alliance. And we appreciate the opportunity to have had input to this process today, as well as the public docket coming up, and trust our views are helpful for FDA staff and reviewers in the progress of research for patients. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Next, I have Kimberly Beer.
Thank you. I'm Kimberly Beer. I'm the Director of Public Policy at Susan G. Komen, and I want to thank the FDA for giving us this opportunity to invite patients to come and share their stories. And we have had the pleasure of working with the FDA to ensure proper representation. However, I am significantly disappointed that the breadth of the diversity in the breast cancer community is not represented here. And so Komen is committed to ensuring that during the public docket period that we really emphasize outreach to those folks who are not women, only women. Breast cancer impacts men, diversity in ethnicity, diversity in health literacy, diversity in stage and type of disease. This meeting is critically important, and so we look forward to working with you and ensuring that we have patients comment on the docket, as well as we look forward to hearing what those folks on the web also submit. Thank you.
Thanks, Kimberly. And lastly, we have Catherine O'Brien.
Thank you. When Shirley started her remarks, she mentioned that today 108 people, U.S. people, will die from metastatic breast cancer. And that is 40,000 people per year. One thing that we don't know is how many people are currently living with metastatic breast cancer. We say that there are 150,000 U.S. people living with metastatic breast cancer, but that is an estimate only because our U.S. Cancer Registry does not count metastatic recurrence. Women are counted when they die or when they are a de novo presentation, such as myself. But we know that only 10% are people like me, people who are metastatic from their first diagnosis. Most people join the metastatic breast cancer ranks having been treated for early stage breast cancer, but we do not track that. And what we do not count, the people we do not count, we do not provide for. Finally, I'm reminded of an advocate, a late advocate whom I had much respect and admiration for, Susan Davis. Susan had many chemotherapy regimens, and she always said she could handle the worst side effects, the harshest drug. And Susan said, I live in hopeful dread. I hope that my next set of scans that I have every 3 months will be good, but I dread that they will not. And that is the reality for the estimated 150,000 U.S. people living with metastatic breast cancer. They live in uncertainty. Oftentimes in popular parlance, when we talk about breast cancer treatment, we talk about slash, burn, poison. For the metastatic community, another way to put it would be scan, treat, repeat. Because every 3 months for most people, you have a set of scans which determines whether your treatment is working. If it is not working, you have to try and find another drug. We've talked today about what the implications of those drugs might be. So I thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. And so before we get started with our last agenda item, I'd like to ask Sarah and Kathy to please pick up the clickers from the tables. And then I'd also like to remind you that we do have evaluation forms outside, and we would really appreciate your feedback. So please leave, if you could fill it out and please leave them at the table, that would be great. Now lastly, I'd like to call Dr. Amy McKee to the stand for our closing.
So I think I'm going to summarize with, there are 2 things I've heard today consistently. One, every patient is an individual. Every patient is going to have their own story about how their disease responds to treatment and how they handle the toxicities of that treatment. And I'll go back into that a little bit more. And the second thing is that we have a lot of work to do. There's a lot of work to be done. So I want to thank you all for sharing your stories, because it's really important for us to hear as regulators how these treatments affect you, both in terms of how they work and how you think about it when you choose them, and how you have to handle all the toxicities and the doctor's appointments that go along with those treatments. I think one of the things that we were really interested in hearing from you, because it's something that we deal with every drug that comes before us or where we have to make a decision, is how do we describe whether or not you should pick this treatment for yourself? And so we use clinical trials to do this, and we use statistics to try to summarize it. And you sort of saw a little bit of that with that question. If you had an average 2-month improvement in survival, but lots of toxicity, would you choose that for yourself? And this is what we have to do every day. We have to think about, for this population, for these specific patients, do we think that there's enough benefit that the risks are worth it? And we use statistics to try to decide that, but that could never answer the question for an individual patient. And that's where you all have to come in with your oncologist and your family and yourselves to make that decision. And then the second thing is, there's a lot of work to be done. We want to continue this dialogue with you. We encourage all of you to engage with the FDA and with clinical trials and with advocacy groups as much as you can. I'm actually a little bit bleary-eyed because I've been trying to stay up for the last 3 nights to watch PBS's series Emperor of All Maladies. And last night, I think the most hopeful thing about it was, there is a lot of work to be done, but we're in such an exciting time right now. We know we've talked about genomic sequencing. We're talking about immunotherapies. There are so many more options than some of the women who are in this room who are diagnosed at a time when there were almost no options beyond extremely toxic therapy and surgery, and you might not even know what surgery you're going to get when you went under anesthesia. And so I think it's an exciting time and a hopeful time, and I really thank you all for sharing your perspective, because it's very important when we make decisions and we evaluate the data about not how it's going to affect the population, but how it's going to affect each individual patient. So I thank you, and please fill out your evaluations, because it's really important for us to read them, because we take it all into account. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Really appreciate it.
I wanted to get.
No, I was.